Okay, so some of you may have used this tool. Um, so this is going to be a story of how I created it and why it exists. And yes, it is some of the worst obfuscation of data you will ever see. Quick disclaimer, this presentation is current as of last month. Amtrak has made some changes to their site, so it may not be 100% representative of what's actually there now. So beforehand, let's go back about a decade and a half. The only Amtrak status available was this guy in North Carolina who made a tool that I will be lovingly call Dixieland, because that is the name of his domain. Um, it basically scraped Amtrak's site once for every train to find out where it is with a manually entered station database and all, and it would display the status to you in these raw text formats. Back in the day, still used by many, many, many people today. Well, on September 29th, 2013, Amtrak launched their real-time tracker. I will call it RTTL because that was the URL. And it was a very clumsy UI. It was this, you clicked on the button on the bottom and you got this pop-up. It was this little window that you couldn't resize. And if you tried to link directly to this page from a third-party site, it would dump you on the home page and make you click on it. So I thought, okay, what can I do to make this a little better to use? It gives this little train status window. You scroll through this little list in a little window. So I went through the back end and it came out to this pretty nice JSON file. It was hosted on Google Maps Engine, and it's something I could use to build a better tool. So I decided, okay, let's plot it on a map. And the first iteration looked like this. It was just icons on a map colored by on-time performance with some hidden data fields. So the first version went live in April of 2015. It looked like this: primitive Google Maps controls for status, just taking the data straight from the feed and publishing it. So there was two big advantages here over Dixieland. One, it wasn't text, and two, it had the GPS location. Also, three, it had estimated arrival times, which were sourced directly from Amtrak's feed for now. Okay. So the original file was hosted on Google Maps Engine, which, as we all know, no longer exists. Shortly before it was decommissioned, Amtrak updated their site to use a new data source. So when you went to the site, it pulled this blob. The Google Maps Engine feed actually stayed live for a while, so I thought, okay, whatever, this will be a nice project one day. I put it off. But I realized eventually I had to use this, or else we would have a problem when that feed stopped updating. So I went to figure out, okay, how can we parse this? Because clearly the train data is somewhere in here. It's what your browser was pulling every time you opened the map. The JavaScript looked like this. Okay. I was stuck with no choice at the time but to literally start parsing this, going through a bunch of unobfuscation utilities and doing a bunch of deobfuscation by hand to try to figure out what the original file actually contained. So the overall structure of it is it's two concatenated base 64 strings. The second one is always a constant 88 characters, or the JavaScript says the sum of the first 9 Fibonacci numbers. And that's a constant, and you pull that out, and they decrypt as base 64 strings. But still, base 64 strings don't give you data. Well, at least not in a usable form. So I kept looking at the JavaScript, and I found that it was calling 3 separate files. Here's some relevant snippets of the files, or 2 separate files in this case. So it defines 3 constants, quickly defined here. These are their values. And you have to run a decryption algorithm with it. Twice. The first time on the little tiny string at the bottom of 88 characters with the constants from that file, which I found out over the course of a few years actually were constants. I had no reason to pull that file every time. They did not change in 4 years. So you get this key. Now, note that this key does change because it contains the timestamp in it, and it's dependent on those 88 characters. That key isn't the data, but from there, we're very close to the data. We do it again on the giant string. Same settings. And the result, you get the same JSON back. that you could then put back in wherever you were doing before. So Amtrak finally stopped updating the Google Maps engine feed in December of 2015. I found out through a bunch of angry forum posts, why is your site dead? I realized just a few weeks prior, I had figured this out, and I guess the code had to be productionized whether it was ready or not. Some overall stats, we started out with about 3,000 sessions a day. The day before Thanksgiving 2016, it peaked at around 6,000, and that brought the server to its knees. So I had to set up a dedicated cloud hosting type setup. And with that, we were able to handle a lot more users, and we're up to almost 9,000 by earlier this fall. The data was then able to be saved because I had a better server with more space. So it's about 280 megabytes a day in raw JSON fetched every 3 minutes, and over 37,000 pings a day. And that's just being stored in a big MySQL table. I realized I could do a lot with this data. The first thing I did was let's plot it on a map with the speeds. So this is the Southwest Chief in New Mexico. And you can see that it is largely pretty fast and then slows down through Raton Pass. This was inspired by the post-crash analysis of Amtrak 188 in the Washington Post. The person who did that collected that data before the feed was encrypted. Well, I had to do it again, unfortunately. We did it for the crash of 501 in Washington State in 2017. And somehow the Associated Press picked up on it. Yay, I guess. So Amtrak has caught on, and they've made some changes. Well, it looks largely the same, except that it's now full screen. You can play with it. You can link to it. The data, unfortunately, as of December, was still encrypted. It's changed a little since. Still clumsy. Maybe they listened because I was pulling a good number of their users. The code in 2018 looks like this. It's no longer all scrambled up. But that. Whatever they were using to obfuscate code obviously strips out a comment. So if they forget to run through the obfuscator, you get that. So I guess I'll give you a quick demo. This was significantly abbreviated from the DC presentation. And I forgot to mention that Via Rail Canada also has a similar service. That it was a much nicer JSON file that I could pull directly. The downside was it didn't have departure dates of trains. So for all the overnight trains, I had to hard code schedules in order to be able to deduce a departure date to represent each case individually. So let's go through a brief demo. Unfortunately, we have the worst possible day for this because the Chicago hub is currently shut down because of the weather. So the site looks like this. The vast majority of visitors never reach this. Instead, they link straight to the map. So I'll go through this one at a time. We'll start with the map, which is the obvious one. So it's a leaflet map in the background, used to be Google until they changed their API structure. And the Empire Builder did arrive. So Chicago is completely barren until tomorrow. So you can zoom in and you can click on a train. We see its past stops as well as upcoming stops. These estimates are taken directly from Amtrak. I'm in the process of working on something to enhance them because these are usually extremely conservative estimates that assume very much impractical running times. The current speed is listed here as well as the update time. You can link from, I can't find it. You can link to the detail page by clicking on the Amtrak train number. And this is basically an archive of what I have. So it's the long form version, i.e. a prettified version of what Dixieland has. And the individual pings. So there, 113 on the Carter over by, looks like Northeast Maryland. So because of the fact that the old sites still give me a significant portion of link to traffic, I link back to them. By the way, you can also download the ping history as a CSV should you choose. So you can view it back on Dixieland, which is just that. Some people prefer this view, so I give it. And Dixieland also has this well, before I get to that. So you can link, there's also somebody who's made Dixieland into a searchable database. So you can, for instance, see this train in New Haven. This is not my page, but I linked to it out of, I guess, mutual respect, because we all work with the same data. So he plots the history of it. And people have used this many times to plot their vacation connections. Should I plan an extra day in Chicago? Or you can view the upcoming departures by station. I should probably not use something up on the data. I don't want, should I? I guess I could use New York. We are in New York anyway. So this is a big upcoming trains list. For New York, of course, it's very long. Where it was last known, etc., and the weather. As well as every train that's coming to you, mostly in the Northeast Corridor, but also a few from Florida. And this is the recently passed history determined from querying the database. And we can also view that on Dixieland, who has a relatively whimsical tool. You can make this sound, you can make this play sound. I don't want to figure that out right now. Yeah. So I guess I'll take questions from here.